What's up guys, my name is Robin and I make stuff, and today I'm going to be painting a harbor seal. One of the things I love to do in my own practice is find art by other artists and then figure out how to recreate that. And I want to open up that world to my students as well. So today we're going to be taking the art from Slaveika Aladjova. I'm really sorry, Slaveika, if I messed that up. I probably did. Anyways, this painting is awesome. It's very loose and free and colorful. One of the things I've learned recently from an artist by the name of Sterling Edwards is that if you paint the unexpected, people are drawn to that because there's something interesting about it. If we just paint everything to look like everything, what's interesting about that? I mean, obviously there's interesting things. So when I saw this harbor seal and all these crazy colors and very loose and very drippy and fun, I knew this was going to be a fun one for my students. So as usual, if you enjoy hanging out with me today and you learn something from this video, even if you don't and you want to come back for more, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I really appreciate your support, and let's get into it. We got a lot of really fun colors going on in here, and we're going to work light to dark, a little bit of wet on wet, but also wanting to keep some of those really fun shapes, those brush shapes that we have in there. We want to communicate that this is a harbor seal, but all of the fun little spots and stuff that you see on this picture are going to be implied by using bright, vibrant colors like you would not see in an actual harbor seal, and that's what makes it fun. And that's what's going to make it fun to paint. There's some drips, there's some splatters, there's some wet on wet, there's some fine details, and the basic shape of the harbor seal. Slaveika did put some wet in here and then also dropped some more wet blue, and that's why it's starting to spread out. But this drop, for example, is wet onto dry because you can see the little splatters coming out from it. The eyes are great, and the nose and all of this, we're gonna kind of suggest that shape. That's pretty important, but we're not going for photorealism at all. We just want to convey a shape. And look over here, there's hardly any line, but our eye and our brain says this is the continued shape of this seal. And so getting this shape down is the basic idea, and then figuring out where these eyes, the nose, and the mouth go are going to be really important. We could mask out some whiskers just in a few spots, so we'll do that just for an added bonus. And then we'll just get to work having fun using this as a reference and trying to just do some fun, loose stuff while also using our brush to create these big, blobby brush strokes. And I believe that this artist is literally just doing something like that. And then these are going to be smaller in there, and then much more detail as it gets into the eyes. We've got our little reference photo here, and I'm going to start by drawing the basic shape of our seal. Whenever I have a visual reference of any kind, meaning I'm not painting something out of my head, I'm looking at something and trying to transfer it onto my paper just by looking at it, I'm going to use the edges of my paper as well as the edges of the reference that I'm looking at to determine spacing. So for example, the top of the paper to the top of the seal's head, how big is that? He's got this kind of weird circular almond shape here, and then some blue. So my guess is the whole eye was painted blue, and then coming back in with some black and maybe leaving a little bit of white there, and that's how that would be accomplished. So we're painting the lighter color first, then painting the darker one on top, leaving some of that blue to show through. There's a lot of different kinds of masking fluid. I have this PBO masking fluid and a cheap little brush. This stuff smells pretty bad. Here, take a little whiff. So this paints on pretty easily and dries. So we're gonna come in here and these whiskers kind of go down. Whew, this stuff is so stinky. 2 little strokes like that, and then we'll do a few on the other side. We don't want it to be over the top, but just something to show that there are some whiskers in here, and maybe one up in here. We will also do some darker paint in there, just trying to make sure if we got everything. Okay, so that has to dry before we can paint over it, and it's going to create this kind of rubbery layer. This is just a practice round, and we're learning how to paint it together. Harbor seals is what brings us together today. Where are my light colors? I'm going to say kind of these light purples in here, and also there's some light pinks but behind this color over there. So let's mix up some of that purple color that we see underneath. So I'm going to get some red and ultramarine blue. The more water we add to it, the lighter that color will be going onto our paper. And so we have that color kind of in here. Looks like almost there's some water kind of dropped in there. It's very layered, and that's interesting. So it's not super smooth. You get that when the edges dry. A little more blue. It's a little more of a blue purple. I'm just gonna come in here and kind of plop some color in, very loose, painting really quick. Also kind of looking at my reference photo back and forth. Now I want to be careful of this area and keeping that kind of white, and kind of going around his snout area. Clean my brush off. So now I want to just put some water in here, and maybe going around here, get some blooms going in there. And this is going to dry lighter than we think, and I may have needed a little more blue, but that's okay because I just have this light color. It's going to dry lighter. Get a little more blue up in here. And this, I might be going too dark on all of this. That's okay. So he's got some blues in here. I'm just going to put some of that in there. Maybe we'll paint his nose while we're right here. Very quick brush strokes, kind of sketchy and a little irregular. He's already looking pretty scary, so that's good. We're on the right track. I'm going to plop a little bit of this blue kind of around this eye, and maybe I'll put some blue over in here. Building this and trying to go loose. Now I can see right in here it's very light, so I'm going to clean my brush out, pull some of that color back. Kind of paying attention to the same colors. Maybe we drop some water in here. Get some more of that purple and just plop some water in and see what happens with that. But wanting to paint all this light color first. Maybe down in here there's some lighter color, but then dries. This needs to be a little bit lighter. Pull a little bit of that up. Okay, it's looking good. We're going really light, and then we're going to build our darks, which are going to pull everything together. So we've got that purple kind of in here. Get a little bit of water on my brush. Very loose. So one of the things I've learned with painting loose is use a bigger brush. Even this brush isn't that big, but I'm painting on a pretty small piece of paper. As I go into these, I'm not going to use this long round because I definitely want a rounder tip on my brush. This is just giving me a little bit of control kind of around these eyes. And honestly, I could probably put this blue around the eyes now and just kind of let it feather itself out. So let's say that that blue is some manganese blue. Put that in here. And remember, I'm coloring the whole eye. Maybe there's a little white speck left in there, because we'll come back later and put black in there and let the blue then show up. But for now we want to have that blue in there as kind of the base. This is pretty dark. Let's lift that out just a little. Get that. We've got some yellow in here, and I know that they're putting that on first before this because this goes over top of that yellow. This cadmium yellow. We're going to blob that in here. Ooh, that's a little green. That's okay. I've seen worse things in my life. And we'll just kind of get that wet. And maybe if we drop some water in here and we just tip it a little bit, it really wants to run. It wants to do it. Just do a few little splatters and see if I can get that to connect. So when you let all that run, it takes a lot of the color with it, so it lightens up automatically. If I let my board stay flat and did this nice and flat, that color would just dry right on there and be dark. I'm just doing this for fun and to experiment. Oh hey, I just noticed there's some yellow up in here. So let's get a little bit of that yellow. And I'm adding some yellow, then added some water. Maybe I'll splatter in there just so it looks a little bit like it was on accident versus me painting it in there. This is a painting that you should just have fun with. And don't get discouraged if your painting looks pretty bad. Like right now, this is looking pretty weird and pretty bad and maybe even a little demonic, but every watercolor painting goes through this ugly stage, and that's where we're at. So just hang in there with me. Let's keep on going. All right, we're gonna put some of these orange colors up in here. It's pretty dry. There's a nice light orange color underneath all of this, so we'll do that one first. And that kind of goes all the way down. I'm not striving for perfection on this, just so you know. I'm striving for suggestion. So now that that's in there, there are some soft colors. We'll just kind of plop some colors in here while it's still wet. And let that kind of soften up a little bit. The thing with doing wet on wet is that you have to move quickly. If your paper dries, your paint isn't going to react the same. Moving fast is pretty important. As I look at this more, I see, there's that little area of blue underneath there, and it's so light, you hardly even notice it. That's the thing. This brush is a little more round on the tip. Sure, round brushes come to a point, but I need something a little more round. He's got some blue underneath here. It's like that blue, and then he's got this like manganese blue on top. It might be important to do that blue underneath first, which would also be this blue, because he's got manganese on top of that. We're just gonna get some of this gray blue, ultramarine, mixed with some other colors that were randomly on my palette. We're gonna go in here like this, get a little more water on my brush. Pull this in here, just kind of blobbing some paint. Now, he's got drips. Let's say that we know how to do that. You can just blow it. Starting to put some of that color in here that's underneath that we see, trying to give him the suggestion of some of those little spots. Mine's not going to be the same as this artist. You know why? Because I'm not that artist. Yours will not be the same as mine. You just got to do you. It almost looks like they dropped some water in some of these, right? Like here's a bloom. I'm going to put a little bit darker paint over in these areas. This down here. We'll paint that in as well. So it's skipping over my little masking fluid, which is nice. Guess what? If we take this away, oh hey, it looks like it's turning into a seal. We have nothing to compare it to. Get out of your head about comparing yourself to other people. Yes, it's good to do that so that you can learn and grow and try new things, but at the same time, it can be a monster. Ultramarine blue and surprise, surprise, burnt sienna. So I'm putting that dark color in there while that bottom lip is still wet, and that's just kind of softening up on its own. Painting right through these whiskers because I have that masking fluid on there. So when I take the masking fluid off, it's going to be bright white. I'm also noticing that it's pretty dark along the bottom, as well as this lip is blue. So I got some manganese blue, and I'm just pulling that through that bottom lip as well. This is probably looking like it's going through a very long, ugly stage, and you're absolutely right. It 100% is. This thing is ugly, but I assure you it's coming together. Once we put the dark in there for the eyes, this thing's really gonna come together. In the meantime, I'm gonna start putting this organic vermilion in here, pretty opaque, so not a lot of water, and just kind of dabbing my brush, a little bit smaller dabs towards the top, and then kind of getting gradually bigger as we get further down. Kind of soften that up a little bit too. I'll show you in just a second. Figure out where this person put a lot of these little spots. You have some that are kind of softened up, so you can just kind of pull a wet or semi-wet clean brush through some of them, even up in here along the bottom, and give those a little bit of a place to go. So I'm essentially putting my clean brush on the paper and then running it into the color, and that will give that color somewhere to run to and soften up that edge just a little bit. See, these are pretty orange. Looking at this side by side, you can hardly tell whose is whose. Okay, that's not true. I can totally tell which one is mine. This is my first time painting a seal, by the way. All right, we've got some big brush strokes over here. Let's go ahead and do some of those. We've got purple. There, we got more of a red. Bigger spots is what's happening. Some orange, that's better orange. Putting some colors in here. I think in here they definitely used more blues. Okay, so the nose looks like a little more of this manganese color. So we'll come in underneath here and do something like that. And we've got some of that manganese blue underneath here. I'm literally just going around looking at colors, looking at the layers, seeing if I missed a layer before I jump into these really dark, rich colors, like the blacks and the manganese blue that's dripping, that blue color, trying to accomplish what they got. But I think honestly I needed to have a little bit wetter paint with some like puddles, letting those dry and create the outlines. We're gonna make some purple, some really dark purple, but this is gonna be that nice, dark, smudgy stuff that you see kind of going across the body. So starting with some little tiny brush dabs and then getting some bigger plops of color in there. Putting some of that underneath that top lip for the shading and smudging it out with my finger a little bit. I'm gonna splatter and just keep putting this texture in there. Just kind of creating some variety. This is where you can really have fun with this type of painting. Very loose, fun, it kind of doesn't matter what happens. Let's get our manganese blue. So really work this blue, make sure it's nice and opaque, and we're just gonna start blobbing this in there, tapping the brush on the paper. Notice I'm not painting anything. I'm not really moving my brush left to right. I'm literally just tapping it on the paper. Kind of using my reference as a guide. Where do I see those blue spots? Wanting this to drip, blowing it a little bit, and then dragging some of that paint down. Putting those splatters in and kind of just letting that go. And now I'm putting some water droplets, clean water, just tapping it into those dark brush blobs that I put on the paper, hoping those kind of bloom out just a little bit, that the water pushes the paint, maybe dries a little lighter in the center, and then also dropping some water splatters into that manganese blue. This is where this whole thing kind of comes together and it starts to really look like a seal. Manganese blue for those little whisker dots, putting in the manganese blue for the longer blue whiskers. We still have that masking fluid on there. And then working this manganese blue and some of the other areas that I see. So little scribbles here and there, some little eyebrow whisker things. This artist did some outlines around with just like dots, like there's fur. And then some organic vermilion eyebrow whiskers as well. A few more little dots of lightened up manganese blue. There's so many different things in here that you see as you just continue to look at it, so it's almost like never ending in a way. Now kind of just lifting a little bit of color out of these dark blobs. And I haven't seen this artist paint this, so I'm just trying to, you know, investigate, experiment, figure it out. Make sure that this is dry. So now if you're looking at the eyes, we put that blue down and we want to leave that blue showing. So creating some black lines and black sections where that blue pops out in between, that's key. We're not painting the blue on afterwards. We painted it first. This could be considered negative space in a sense, and so we're painting around it to let the underneath layer show through. Get some nice black. I'm using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna here, which is kind of my go-to. A nice outline around that top. Make sure it's nice and dark, coming around that bottom edge. And then I'm going to leave a little gap on that inside to make it seem like there's a blue line there, but there's really not a blue line. We're just leaving something unpainted, filling in just a little bit. Look at that eye is coming to life. It's kind of like magic. This is the moment. This is why you have to go through that ugly phase and just stick with it till the very end. Once you get to the point where you're putting these darks in, this whole thing is going to just transform. Few little dark lines or suggestion of lines. I'm not doing a full straight line down the center of his little nose there. Those black lines on the side of the nose, great. And then I'm going to do the same kind of concept around that right eye. So an outline around the outside and then underneath that eye, kind of filling in a little bit darker, leaving that bigger blue center area. Filling in that bottom section of the eyeball, making sure that I leave enough larger area of that blue color in there. It doesn't look so bad. It actually looks like it came from the same family, or that I really used this piece of artwork to inspire me. And I learned a lot from painting this. And that's what I hope, is that you do artwork and each time you learn something new. Sometimes we see things as failures, but it's really just an opportunity to learn something and to grow. A little more blue underneath those eyes, just kind of smoothing things out with some water. I'm trying not to get too detail happy because I want this to feel pretty loose. Guys, this could be this dude's seal cousin. I feel like the seal on the left is a little more happy. Mine's a little more suspicious. Come at me, bro. And the seal on the left's like, don't mind my crazy cousin, Gilbert. I'm gonna lift a little bit out of the top of his nose just to give it a little bit of a highlight. There are some red splatters. You can choose whatever color you like. I thought red was kind of an odd choice, if I'm being honest. You know, seals get eaten by things out in the ocean, and I don't know what's happening over there, but some last minute light blues coming in. Once you go to remove this masking fluid, you're typically gonna do that by using an actual masking fluid remover. It's kind of like an eraser or your finger. I want to make sure that's really dry. I don't want to run the risk of smudging anything. I want these lines to stay nice and crisp. With a jelly roller pen, I'm just going to put a few little dots in here as some highlights, little glistening in those eyeballs. And now I'm going to remove this masking fluid, just rubbing it with my finger, using some pretty good muscle in there. And I still had a hard time around that dark area underneath that top lip. So I'm getting the end of my paintbrush and kind of going in there. And that seemed to work pretty well. Just needed a little extra muscle. This was a really cool effect, kind of putting these white whiskers in there, masking them off first. You could use all sorts of other things. If you wanted to, you could use a gouache or another kind of paint. You could use a paint marker. If I can leave the white somehow, I'd prefer to do that. All right, let's take the tape off. Kind of looks like a Gilbert. Well, how do you think it turned out? Not so bad. Very colorful, very fun, very loose. I highly recommend you give it a try yourself. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next time that I make stuff.